Hi, this is your host Q, live and direct from the Psyche Lab Studio, New Delhi. Welcome to the Groundbreakin, where we sit down with creatives, design and business pioneers to discuss their journeys, process, and approach. If you're listening to this podcast for the first time, consider subscribing. Also, check out our website, where we are working on a newsletter and a slowly growing design community on Discord, where we have weekly design live session every Saturday, where we learn something new. If you're listening to it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, give us ratings. It helps us to reach to bigger audience, and also because we are doing one episode a week and excited about the future. As always, we value the feedback of our listeners, so please reach out to us with any comments or questions you may have. You can also shoot me a mail mentioned in the podcast description. For this episode, we have Vincent Wagner, aka Vincent Computer, a highly sought after designer known for his expertise in 3D lettering, typography, and animation. We having a chat about his background in law and media to his current state in the design world. We also talking about the importance of typography and animation in design and how Vincent approaches these mediums in his work. We took a deep dive into the topic of finding one's niche in the competitive design industry and his thoughts on the role of typography in today's design landscape, as well as his experience with being featured in Slanted Publishers Magazine and being a judge at the Type Directors Club. Hello, Vincent. How's it going?
Hey Deepak, it's all good. How are you?
Yeah, doing fine. I'm assuming it's a little early in your day there.
Yeah, it's okay. It's about 10:30, so nothing to worry about.
All right. Where are you right now? How's the weather like?
I'm in Vienna. It's cloudy. About I don't know 5 to 10 degrees, something like that. So it's a bit warmer than the last couple of days. It feels like maybe spring is coming someday soon. I don't know.
How's the work like? I mean, tell me something about you've been doing. Then we can maybe take like a little deep dive into your career and how have you been doing?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, recently everything's been still kind of starting to get the year going. So. I've had a rather long Christmas break, and then everything kind of everything piled up, and I had a couple of weeks to kind of get everything going for the new year. A couple of projects coming in, a lot of planning, when to do what, and all of this. And now, yeah, time to get work done for this year, and also time to kind of plan where this whole thing should go over the next couple of months.
Sounds very exciting. I mean, in my case also, I've been I also had like a longer break at around the New Year's, and we've been also sick around. So yeah, I mean, a lot of things to catch up, a lot of interesting things which are coming up. Let's just go a little back in your career, Vincent. We had our last call where you talked something about your initial career and how you get started. So you started studying law. Started with studying law and then media. Can you maybe talk about that phase?
Sure. Yeah, I have a bit of a weird CV in that sense. I after school I started studying architecture, but very briefly, only for 2 semesters, and I kind of lost interest because I was kind of pressured myself a bit too much, and it just was too much and made me lose interest and lose the fun of it. And then coming from a family of lawyers, the next logical thing kind of was to try to study law, which was not really an idea of passion, but it was more like, this could work. This is something I kind of know my way around in at least in theory, and there's I know this is something you could do, and I knew I would be continuously supported by my family, and I had other things in mind than my whole career path. You know, it was like after like architecture was really something I wanted to do and I was very passionate about. And after this kind of broke away, I didn't really know what to do, and so I figured, why not try this? And then pretty quickly after starting law, I realized that it probably wasn't going to be my dream career, but it kind of worked out a bit too well, so I had no real reason to quit. It was like coming from already having quit one path of studying, and then going through these law exams without any real trouble. I couldn't justify to just say, hey, I'm gonna quit this as well. So I kind of did that, and while I studied, I started working part-time just to, you know, do something else as well. It just so happened that I basically on a whim I applied to for a paid internship at a major music label here in Vienna, and they took me on, and I was in business development at Sony Music here in Austria, which was pretty interesting. And I did that for a year, or this was this limited time thing. And after that they offered me a full-time job, but I declined because I figured I wouldn't be able to finish my studies if I were to start working full-time already. So I went back and finished my studies. Then I did a bit of law stuff. Like there's this post-university it's more or less an internship kind of thing at a court and at the public prosecutor's office and all of that, which you have to do if you want to become a lawyer or become a judge or whatever. And so I did that because I was interested in just seeing how these things work, and it was pretty interesting. But it kind of just it made it even more clear to me that this wasn't really my area of work or the way I wanted to kind of lead my life. So I then went back to the music, the record label. They kind of offered me a full-time job after I was done there, and then I was there for I don't know, a year, maybe a year and a half, and it was really interesting. It was really cool. People are very nice. Obviously, at least to me, the whole music and media business is an interesting landscape. It's there's a lot to discover there and a lot to learn. But the whole thing of this, this multinational corporation, the mechanics, the kind of the politics of the whole thing, really turned me off, to be honest. And so after a year or a year and a half, I quit there. And then I've always been doing graphic design on the side, like for me and for friends and whatever, starting out with web design and stuff like that, and then moving more into like print publishing things, like photography, like photo books and stuff like that. And then I thought maybe this could be something I could do for a living. And I started while working at a media agency where I was basically a salesman for media stuff, things like that. I started studying graphic design in at night, at a night school kind of situation. And this was more like a basic graphic design and print design and production kind of thing. And it was a 3-year part-time study, which was it was a bit exhausting, to be honest, because working from 9 to 4, and then studying from 5 to 9, and then, doing this 5 days a week, or four, I think it was 4 days a week was at school, and then 5 days a week work. And it was a bit much, but it was cool. And while I was there, I had the opportunity to get a couple of clients, and I decided to try and go freelance directly while I was still at graphic design school, because I had no real obligations. I had no strings attached in that sense. And so I knew these couple of clients could sustain me for a couple of months. And I figured if I was to try it, then why not try it now? And that was kind of the start of my career I'm in now, because at the beginning I did a lot of different things, from very traditional graphic design, print design, web, and 3D, because I had come in touch with 3D when I was studying architecture, and I've been playing around with it every now and then, and so I did all of that, and over time I just developed more skills in 3D and also more interest in 3D, and so I moved there, and I think it's now 2 or 3 years that I only do 3D, and that's where I am.
Wow, yeah, you definitely had like a really interesting journey, Vincent. And I mean, the best part about all of these insights you mentioned about the careers you hopped on, is that you were always wanted to maybe challenge yourself, and you maybe constantly looking for seeking for what you really like to do, which a lot of people don't do. And when you get started with 3D, I can see that you were maybe starting out, you were not posting a lot of typography in it. So is that something that came on the way, or well, while you were doing graphic design, you were always interested in typography? Because I can see from your Instagram page as well that you started with a lot of nice materials and with nice lighting, and then kind of moved towards typography. How did that came?
Well, I went into 3D from a photography perspective, kind of. So I had quite a long period of time where I was very much interested in photography, and I myself photographed a lot, but I also was really curious about other photographers' work and everything. But I was very interested in studio photography as well, but I was too lazy to really set up kind of a proper studio, and I also back then had the problem that all of this gear was so expensive compared to what I had earned or what I wanted to spend, and so like all the lights and all the whatever, and so it was really liberating to have all of this in a box. Of course, it's not the same, but I was able to execute on ideas I had, which I would have probably also have been able to execute in photography. But so that's where I came from. I came from a material and lighting perspective to the whole thing, and there was this other interest that developed over time, which was typography. And in the beginning, I didn't really see how or if I should merge these, and it just happened organically, I would say. So the more 3D commissions I took on, the more I felt kind of the urge to also do more typographic work, because at the beginning when I went freelance, I had this typography part with all the regular graphic design jobs and a couple of logos I did and a couple of things in that area. But the more I focused on 3D, the less typography I had in my work, in my day-to-day. And so I think that's where it kind of creeped back in. And it just kind of came naturally, and it came easily. And so I just did it, and I posted it because I figured why not? And and over time, interest, also like commercial interest, started to develop more and more. And of course, 3D type and 3D lettering, all this Chrome type stuff, everything is pretty trendy now for the last couple of years. And so I guess it was a happy coincidence kind of situation.
Yeah, makes sense. At what stage you've realized that, oh yeah, this is working for me and I'm really enjoying it, and how did you even get like your first client, for you were doing a 3D type, for example?
Yeah, you mean before 3D type or 3D type itself?
I mean, when you started, I'm assuming that you already got clients when you were doing 3D. But what happened to the, when you started putting more typography stuff out there? At what stage you realize that, okay, this is for me?
Yeah, it's interesting because I wasn't sure for a long time if that was kind of a viable option to follow that path. But I kind of was lucky because I came from this very broad background. So I had clients in other areas, and I could try this out, the whole 3D type thing. And at first it was like small artists wanting some type for some cover artwork, or someone to print something on a t-shirt or something like that, like really small commissions, just rather quick, rather badly paid kind of deals. But I noticed that the moment I focused my communication more on this 3D type thing, that other people became aware of it, and other people kind of came to me basically because they saw this very niched down, focused approach. And so I think, to say that I had a moment where I realized this could work for me would be exaggerated, I think, because, to be very honest, I'm still not sure how long this will last. It is an interesting area, but I'm really not sure how much of it is just trend and how much of it will kind of persist once everyone has seen too much Chrome type, which maybe already is the case. So let's see how much of this whole area kind of is really sustainable. I don't know, but is it? The moment I knew I could do it, at least for now, probably was when larger clients came to me for 3D type specifically. That is like, I can't really talk about the project itself, but I've been working for this agency, Saatchi and Saatchi, and they specifically wanted me to do 3D type for a pretty large client of theirs. The project itself is kind of at least from my perspective, it's kind of a mix of advertising and branding, somewhere in the middle. And yeah, that's I guess when I realized, okay, if clients of this size and agencies of this magnitude are interested in this kind of stuff, then maybe that's something you could do on the long term as well.
Yeah, I definitely can say that you are a person who is very adaptable, and when you say that that how long the trend's gonna go, and I really don't think that's gonna replace players like you out there, and I'm sure when this is happening, you'll adapt to something crazier, and I think you've already established yourself. You are judging type directors this year, so that's like congrats for that. Yeah, and when did this idea come from of kicking off a 3D type Foundry?
Like the idea wasn't it was there for a long time actually, but the kind of the decision to really act upon it came much later actually. So I think it was, when was it? Like maybe 2 years ago or something like that. I don't do this by myself, so I'm partnering up with Daniel Gremme, who is a graphic designer and like a communication designer and type designer from Germany. And he got in touch with me back in, I don't know, like 2020 maybe, 2021, something like that. When he wrote his bachelor's degree, like his thesis, because he wrote about 3D type, and he saw my 3D version of Pilo Lava, that typeface by Velveteen Type Foundry, or by how's it called? Antomolia and Jeremy Long, the two type designers who did the original, and I did this 3D version. It wasn't really, the 3D version was very popular, but it was kind of known in certain circles, let's say. And so he got in touch with me, just asking me a couple of questions to include in his bachelor's thesis. And later he came to me with the idea of doing a 3D Type Foundry, and we kind of talked about it a bit, and we thought it was a fun idea, but I think we didn't act upon it in the beginning, but we kind of said, okay, let's keep this in mind, let's maybe talk about it again. And then we kind of, there was this talk we gave, also a type directors thing, for Type Drives Culture, where I was asked to kind of put together a panel for 3D type, and I asked Daniel and also Alex Valentina to join me on this talk. And afterwards we kind of got together and said, okay, maybe if type directors and people of that sort start to be interested in 3D type, then maybe let's give this a try. So and it's fun because there was or is a 3D Type Foundry I got in touch with a couple of years back, which is called High Type, and they or the one guy who did this, he made a 3D version of a very popular typeface by Dynamo Type Foundry, but I think it didn't really take off. So, and the interesting question to me is, why is that the case? Is it maybe it wasn't the right time? Maybe it wasn't the right typeface? Or maybe it's just an overall bad idea? So we'll have to figure that out. But we wanted to do something where we can really try and find some kind of meaningful use of 3D space for typography, because most of what you see today, and also most of what I do today, is kind of flat. It's basically flat 2D surfaces with kind of a 3D look to it. But most of it is basically just kind of a style. It's not really, it doesn't really use space in the actual sense. And so we kind of wanted to challenge this status quo and look at meaningful ways to use space. And that's our approach for now, and we see how it turns out.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a great idea, Vincent, and you should definitely go for it, because already I've been seeing, I mean, suddenly everyone's, loving bold typography, 3D, some techie elements to it, things like that. I mean, lately, as we've been talking about, platforms like Chrome type, then suddenly now it's like a new genre of design. And I think for a lot of people, for non-designers, and a lot of, even into a lot of designers, I've been into that conversation where they say that, okay, this is not design, this is art, So, I mean, where do you find this? I mean, I'm sure there's very thin line between these two. I mean, considering the new design trends we are having around. I mean, how do you classify these two things? Why in your
Yeah,
process, for example?
that's very difficult for me, to be honest. I used to really see myself only as a designer. I always shied away from kind of thinking of myself as an artist, and I still don't really do, because there's I feel like, I mean, it's kind of this whole, these more flashy and more more kind of extroverted styles of typography are probably take more inspiration from art than other more sober typography does, but it still is design to me, because there is a prompt, there is kind of a goal, there is a communication strategy behind it. It's usually not a, there's usually not an artistic concept at the base of it, but more of a communication concept usually. And so that's my take on it. But I can see, I mean, there are people approaching it a bit differently, I guess. There are people approaching it from a more artistic perspective, and that's fine as well, and that's great. But to me, like, my approach is always kind of the design approach. But then again, there's also this whole lettering aspect to it, where what is that? Is that design? Is that art? Is that craft only? I don't know. It's somewhere in the middle, I guess.
Yeah, we can say that. Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert, definitely, but of course there are some technicalities about the kerneling,
Yeah,
things like that.
that's
Yeah.
the thing. There's so many. There's at least like 2, 3, 4 kind of different things you would have to consider, and I'm not sure there's one that is kind of the main thing, or if it's just a moving system of a couple of aspects.
Yeah, that's right. And how do you think brands and all these big companies are considering typography as an element, and typography and animation in their design, and how do and why would you say? I mean, you just mentioned that you don't know how long it's gonna go. What's the scene out there? I mean, I definitely can say that it's going pretty good. I mean, all the every other day I'm looking at some nice campaigns with some really nice nicely designed typography, even animation. How do you think it's still out there, and how can you think that it's can be important for fresh perspectives, people who are young people, for example.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think the thing is, I think typography has always had the potential and also the use of kind of really setting a tone to some extent. I mean, it's usually not the only thing setting the tone, and it's usually or often not even the main thing. So if we see it in terms of like branding campaigns or advertising, then there's always usually images or video, like photos or videos are usually the main carrier of emotion and of kind of direction. But typography has always been very important in these areas, and I think that through the use of more extravagant typography, you get the option of setting a larger focus on type, and you can just communicate even more emotion and more brand value, to speak in this kind of lingo, and communicate this through typography alone, and through movement alone, and through animation. And so I think that is what brings brands to using this kind of thing. For one, of course, it's trendy, it's interesting right now. They kind of do something new, and they can communicate to their clients that it's cool and whatever. But But then again, it's kind of it's not a new tool set, but it just gives you more options of how you want to portray your project or your information. And so that's something I think is really interesting. And I think there's still and there will always be new things to discover and new things to do. Typography has been here for so long, and it's not going to go away anytime soon. So if you're into it and if you want to explore it, I'm sure there will always be something to do that is going to be not new, but at least interesting and kind of worthwhile and substantial.
Yeah. I mean, you also mentioned that you've been working on a project that you can't talk about with Saatchi and Saatchi. I mean, we all know that it's such a huge agency, and the kind of work they've done in the past and they're doing is just is amazing. How do you think working with them affects you as a creative, or maybe you had like a lot of complex pointers that you have to those hard points that you have to keep in mind, where you can't be maybe a lot more creative. How did this collaboration maybe helped you moving forward and delivering, considering the idea behind of what you're doing?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting you say that, because it really does have an influence in that, in the sense of how you think about these things and how you think about like how you approach the work, because of course these small experiments I do on Instagram or these small type things I do for small artists are rather free in their nature, and there's nothing there aren't many restrictions or specific technicalities I have to keep in mind. But when you do these things on a larger scale and with a large campaign in mind, where you have to deliver for various types of media, where you have to kind of keep in mind all the brand guidelines and whatever, that's something that is a bit more complex, and it definitely it helps you to kind of focus on what is important and what isn't. But it kind of challenges you, because you have to have this technical aspect to it. You have to make sure all the fancy flourishes aside, you have to make sure that this can actually work and be kind of usable in a productive environment. And so it kind of makes you think maybe this is too complicated to really do this at scale, but it does work in the end, but it makes you realize that there are all these systems you have for usually typography that just take off all this technical pressure, so to say. You just don't have them in this case, and so it's more of you're working with letters and with typography, but you're basically an illustrator. You're kind of not a typographer in that sense, because you're just preparing images and things that you have to make sure they work together and can be mixed and matched in whatever manner that's necessary. So I guess it kind of, to break it down, I guess it kind of brings to the surface the complexity of the whole matter if you want to scale this, and that's something to think about. And that's also something to kind of consider when you're approaching a larger project, because you have to make sure before you start to really work up the whole thing that you have an underlying working technical base from which you can then expand. Because the other way around, when the client has already approved something they have seen, and then you have to make sure that it really works in a productive context, that might be pretty tricky on a technical side. So
Yeah, and for this specific project, I mean, let's just go a little back and let me ask this question to you. I've also noticed that you've been featured on places like Slanted Publishers Magazine and other notable publishers. How you were constantly, I mean, again, you were creating, putting things on the social media. Were you also reaching out to people, and I mean, how did they manage to discover you out there? What was your
yeah,
approach?
well, it was kind of a mixed approach, I guess.
Yeah, by the way, I absolutely love what Slanted does. It's just kick-ass, right?
Yeah, I love them too. I've been following their work for quite a while, and I've always enjoyed their magazines. In this case, they had this open call for their experimental typography issue, and I just submitted some work, and it was funny because it was quite fun. I submitted three pieces back then, and then came like this cutoff date where all this deadline, and I got this automated email. Hey, thanks for your submission. Sorry to say we have to decline and whatever, because there was so much work and blah blah blah. So I figured, okay, that sucks, but okay, whatever. And then I totally forgot about it. And after a couple of months, I saw a lot of my kind of pretty type peers on Instagram sharing their feature in this magazine. And I was kind of, okay, that sucks. Yeah, I thought, I mean, this is all great work, don't get me wrong, so it made total sense that they are all in there, but I thought, like, okay, if they are all in there, why can't I be in there? That's kind of weird. And then I realized that they actually had featured me, but they just, from these three pieces, they had declined one and they featured the other two. And so I just didn't know, and I didn't realize. And that was a relief, kind of. And it also showed like how incredibly how much we kind of grab onto these features and experiences, and how important we feel they are, because whatever doesn't really make that much of a difference, but it kind of felt like a relief. And in other cases, I was lucky to have been found somewhere on Instagram or something. Like I got featured in It's Nice That, and I realized that the guy who got in touch with me, really kind and nice editorial assistant, I think. I think he had a very short internship kind of thing at It's Nice That, and he just featured a hell of a lot of people who are somewhat under the radar, I guess. So that was just pure luck, I guess, that he was there. He kind of was interested in the current trends, and he really featured a lot of people who do interesting work but who aren't that known yet. So it was kind of a lucky accident. And then sometimes it's just being part of some project, and someone submits something to some place, and then you're lucky to be in there. It's not as systematic as it probably should be. So
I mean, you definitely make it sound very easy, but I'm sure there's an hours of work.
I don't want to make it sound easy. It's not like I have it figured out. It's more like I have no clue, and I'm lucky that it happens from time to time. That's more of the case. But I have plans to kind of do this a bit more concisely and kind of in a more planned way. But I have yet to kind of write the texts and put together the images and all of that. I feel like, social media is such a mixed bag of we all know it. It's kind of sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you feel really good about it. Sometimes it really, pulls you down. And I think it's just so much based on luck that it just really doesn't make that much sense. I think that if you were to take all of your time, all the time you spend on social media, or working for a social media or whatever, just concisely putting together press texts and images and whatever, and getting in touch with the right people and showing your projects and getting some high profile, so to say, features, I think that would make more sense than trying to go viral on TikTok or whatever. But who knows? Maybe both.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah. I mean, it's like doing a number of things at the same time, and you never know what. So, see, I mean, if we talk about like the bigger the bigger design spectrum, this 3D lettering is still a niche, right? And I mean, when you were starting out, you had an idea that okay, this niche is going fine out there in the industry. And I mean, how would you recommend? I mean, what are the things that you would recommend to people who are maybe starting it out and finding their niche, and kind of what would be your approach to make this whole system more discoverable for them, for the market? What would be your approach if you could have imagined yourself today and when you were starting out? What are the things that you think you could have shared with them?
Yeah. Well, I think there's two things that might sound a bit contradictory, but the one thing I think is important is to kind of try different things to find your spot, to kind of find where you're comfortable, where you're interested, where you're passionate, and where everything comes together for you, where you kind of feel like you're in the right place and you kind of want to do this work. But then at the same time, I think like you need a very clear focus, but then it's also, I think it's very helpful to have a broad background of experiences and areas you have maybe looked into. And so I think the real difficulty here is to kind of find the spot where you say, I've seen enough, I know that this can work for me, and this is what I'm going to stick to now, and this is what I'm going to focus on. And so that's something I've struggled with as well, or not exactly struggled with, but I've moved through a couple of different fields, and I've also, not only before I went into graphic design, but also in graphic design itself. And there are still a lot of things I'm interested in, and a lot of things I could imagine myself working in. But yeah, I think seeing a lot of stuff, trying out a lot of stuff, and then sticking to the one thing that feels the most interesting to you and the most important to you, and then focusing on this relentlessly, as well as good as you can, and then of course, I mean, and then there's another aspect to it, which is you can't always just focus on the one thing. Maybe at least in the beginning, when it's not kind of commercially not viable yet, then it might be difficult, depending on your situation, of course, it might be difficult for you to kind of really focus in on this when you have to do other things to make money or to pay your rent or whatever. So, but you can still communicate very clearly your focus and do other things on the side no one has to know about. But I think this very clear communication of what you do and what you want to do is what kind of helps you to attract the right people. And that's something where all these algorithms finally help as well. They not only depress you, but they can also help you, kind of, because Yeah, at least that was my experience. The moment I really focused my external communication on this one thing, people came to me because of this one thing. And before, when I was more of a jack of all trades kind of guy, yeah, no one really cares.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, when you say that, you also have to consider that you spend hours and hours make the craft better. Uh, what I mean, this just let's also talk a little about business of design. I mean, you okay, you're doing good work. You constantly putting yourself out there. The other things that maybe one should keep in mind with their when they're starting with their niches, then they're doing pretty fine in terms of because in the end we have to make money out of what we are doing, right? So how do you think your approach has changed towards maybe negotiating your deals and getting
Yeah.
projects, stuff like that?
Yeah. Yeah, that's something I'm also, constantly learning about. I think that's something you never really stop learning about, I guess, or I think, at least I haven't yet. I know that in the beginning, and I think a lot of people do the same. I probably was way too cheap in the beginning, always. Um, and that's something that, I mean, it's a difficult thing to say for me from my position right now, because currently I have a good amount of clients and I'm kind of happy with the way it works, but it hasn't always been the case, of course. But I'm not sure. Like back then, I was offering rather inexpensive services, so to say, and that helped me to get clients. But it was also frustrating because then you have to spend a lot of time earning only very little money, and you feel like your craft is undervalued and whatever. Or you feel like your clients don't value your work as much as they maybe should, or they don't realize how much work it is. But I'm not sure if back then, when I started out, if I had been more expensive, maybe I wouldn't have had any clients. So that's really hard to say. That's something I think you have to figure out for yourself. Like, what is your current work worth? What can you, like, how much how much value can you really deliver? How good are you? And that's something very subjective, and that's of course something, yeah, that's difficult to figure out, I think, in the beginning. But like the moment you feel comfortable working for clients, and the moment you realize that you can deliver whatever your client needs or whatever is expected from you, then I think it's important to not work for little money, because it just doesn't make sense. It's not good for you, it's not good for your health, because you work too much and you earn too little. And it's also not good for your client, because you're probably not going to spend your kind of all you have to make it the best kind of best work you can do, because you feel like you get paid so little that it really shouldn't take as much time, or you shouldn't do as many revisions or whatever. So I think once you kind of established your thing and you have enough clients, it's better to offer expensive services and maybe not get every project, but then the projects you get, you can really focus on. You have a lot of time for it, you have enough budget for it, and you can really make the best work you can produce. So yeah, I guess what's the sum up here? Yeah, kind of find a way to establish yourself enough so you can ask for the prices you're really worth, and then that you're gonna make better work, and your clients will be happier, and you will be happier, and you can get more sleep, and then everything's better.
Yeah, I mean, it all comes to the sleep, right? I mean, if you have money in your pocket, you sleep well, especially if you are a creator, So this takes you to our last question. I mean, you've talked about your process and the right things you've done in your journey. What do you think about the future of typography and lettering design, things like that? Because again, it's everywhere. Even lately on Canva, I've been seeing a lot of people have put in their own type, the 3D type, which you can just search with their codes and make things on Canva, things like that. AI taking over. How do you what do you think is the future of lettering design, and where you can maybe play a role out there moving forward?
That's really, really difficult to answer for me. I think what you said is very important. It's a topic maybe for another couple of hours to talk about, but the whole AI taking over thing is something I think we all in the design areas have been thinking about a lot lately, and talking about a lot. So that's something where I think, and I'm kind of afraid that we are going to have to retreat to being more in a direction perspective and less crafty, because there's going to be a lot of craft and a lot of ideation and a lot of brainstorming and all of that, which is going to be probably taken over by AI, which is fine. It's just you have to kind of recalibrate where you put your effort in, and I think that's cool for some people and it won't be cool for others, because I know from myself and also from others that there are many people that, for sure in lettering and maybe also in type design, who just really enjoy the craft of doing this work and getting it, drawing the letters and getting it done and really crafting the stuff out. And so that's something which I think over time will happen less. But then again, who knows? Maybe that's something that will be valuable when everyone can create lettering with a quick prompt. Then maybe it's going to be more interesting. Maybe sign painters are going to have a big comeback, because they really can do the work. I have no clue, to be honest. But what I think is important is that we don't shy away from these technologies and we're not afraid of them or try to avoid them or whatever. Because I've seen this kind of, there are groups, if I can say it like that, who kind of try to push back on AI to some extent, and try to convince people that they shouldn't use it too much and that they shouldn't generate too many images via AI and whatever, because it's not, you should work with designers and whatever. And of course, I think it's important that we kind of still work together as humans in any area, not only in design, but just because we are a social species and that's how it works. But I think we can embrace these technologies and just try what they can offer to us, and we will. To me, it's an uncertain future. It's not really clear where this will lead, but I think as long as we kind of try it out, we see what it can do, we see where it can go, we will be able to create more interesting things. Probably we'll probably create more things and more quickly, and I could imagine a future where it's just maybe there's a project where it'll take me 1 week now, but then in a couple of years it'll only take me 1 day, and then I'll just have to find more clients and do like 5 times the projects. But I think it's just a question of kind of how what you spend your time on and how much you have to do to get it done. It's gonna be fine.
Awesome, Vincent. Had a wonderful chat, and thanks a lot for coming on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. It was a pleasure.